integrity and how it can become the operating system for both business and life. Addiction, shame, integrity, these are things that can be very difficult to stand up and face as a man, as a woman also, but definitely as a man, we have a lot of pride in these things of integrity. We don't want to show our shame. We want to show our strength and our foundation, etc.
And I just didn't notice how much damage that was doing to me. And I didn't notice for a long time until, what really made a huge difference for me is a period of very severe depression, where, at the time I thought, well, I'm depressed, maybe there's a chemical imbalance in my brain, it's kind of bad luck, too bad you have a depressed brain. But now looking back, I'm like, no, actually, my depression made quite a lot of sense. And this is where the idea, because what we're talking about is being in full integrity. The ideal case is that you're so aligned that your whole system feels aligned, right? If you think about, okay, I'm having all the hard conversations, I'm eliminating all the unnecessary stress, I'm eliminating all the unnecessary suffering. What does that feel like?
Welcome everyone to the Connection podcast about connecting to your alignment. And today we have MeLaugh and a brother I was sharing a stage with at the Global Possibilities Summit. And it really struck home what he was talking about. And after I said, let's get on a podcast together. Let's talk about this integrity thing. And he's got a process I'm really excited about and terrified of. And you'll see very soon why. And so I want to read his bio so you can hear a little bit about him. So Shane is a serial entrepreneur, best known for co-founding Thrive Themes and launching a string of software and educational ventures. After 2 decades, long time, of intense inner work, he now teaches men how to walk the razor's edge between strength and surrender, especially in the face of addiction, shame, and a world of confusingly mixed signals for all of us. At the heart of his approach is a topic that we are going to talk about today, integrity, and how it can become the operating system for both business and life. Welcome, Shane. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Joe. It's so good to be here.
Shane, you've done a lot, entrepreneur throughout the years, and then that led you to more of the personal development work. And now you're working with men in these very difficult spaces. Addiction, shame, integrity, these are things that can be very difficult to stand up and face as a man, as a woman also, but definitely as a man, we have a lot of pride in these things of integrity. We don't want to show our shame. We want to show our strength and our foundation, etc. And these are very vulnerable topics that I've dealt with: shame, addiction, and lack of integrity. And it's been a journey to overcome all of those. I'm curious to what led you to this journey to get there.
Yeah, for me, it's like what led me there was kind of a breaking point, really. So I was following this path of entrepreneurship, which definitely felt good. It felt like the right thing for me to do, although it also felt like it wasn't really much of a choice, because I dropped out of university and I figured out I'm basically unemployable, right? I only had the crappiest temp jobs. Couldn't get a decent job. I had no qualifications, but also I couldn't keep a job very well. So I was like, okay, I think I have to do my own thing. So that led me on the path of entrepreneurship, which did feel like the right thing to do. But I think what basically happened is that I was pursuing success, and I was also pursuing self-development in a very performance-focused, I need to optimize myself, I need to become the perfect performance machine kind of way. And I just didn't notice how much damage that was doing to me. And I didn't notice for a long time until, what really made a huge difference for me is a period of very severe depression, where, at the time I thought, well, I'm depressed, maybe there's a chemical imbalance in my brain, it's kind of bad luck, too bad you have a depressed brain. But now looking back, I'm like, no, actually, my depression made quite a lot of sense. Because the way I was living my life, I was just putting so much pressure on myself. I was not treating myself as a human being, really. And I was ignoring all the signals that my body was sending me. I was ignoring all the signals of this is too much stress, this is too much pressure. I was ignoring I was also really, really struggling in relationships. So I had a series of long monogamous relationships that were very, very difficult for me, where I'll be doing the socially acceptable thing of like, or I was following the conditioning of like, well, you're supposed to find the right partner and then make that relationship work. And so even there, I applied this same kind of model of almost like this performance pressure. If the relationship is not working, I'm doing something wrong. I have to improve myself. I have to get better. And like this endless pressure I put on myself led to misery and stress in relationships. And again, I was just ignoring it. My solution was always like, I have to go harder. If it's not working, I have to do the things I'm doing harder instead of going, well, maybe doing more of what's not working is not a good solution. And I think all of this is what led to my depression. I ran myself into the ground. And so that was a real wake-up call, because in many ways I had succeeded in the sense that, I was running a successful business, I was traveling the world, living as a digital nomad, right? Like living the dream. And I was in a relationship at the time. And so it's like things seemed to be great in my life. And so why am I depressed, right? Which is also, I think, part of the struggle with depression. It happens often when you're looking around and being like, well, why am I doing this? So it's almost like you're blaming yourself for being depressed, Look at all the good things I have. But I had to go through that to get to the realization like, okay, there are truths here that I'm not facing. And truths like the relationship I'm in is just not working, and trying harder and trying harder and trying harder is not going to make it work. And also that the way I was running my business is not going to work, right? It's like, in a way, the depression forced me to slow down and actually examine my life. So you could say I'm a very slow learner, right? It took a lot for me to start realizing something's off. Yeah.
Beautiful. What were some of those things, those sort of signs that something had to change?
Yeah. So, it's basically, for me, the first thing that I now pay attention to is kind of just this sense of pressure, which is really something I feel in my body, actually, right? So that's just what I was always ignoring. So whether it's a stressful situation at work or it's a problem in a relationship or anything else, there's like this sense of mounting pressure, which in my case, I actually feel very strongly in my throat. So like, let's say if we are in any kind of, let's say we're working together on a project and stuff is happening where maybe I feel like, I don't know, we're not working together well, right? Something's going wrong and I'm not voicing it. I'm not saying anything. Maybe I feel like you're taking advantage of me or something, but I'm not saying anything. I will feel like a mounting constriction in my throat, right? It's almost like my windpipes are like slowly getting squeezed. The longer I let that build up, the worse it gets, right? And that's something I now notice, where at the time I didn't even make the connection. I was just like, yeah, I feel super tense. I also get like a really tense neck. And it got so bad at one point I could barely turn my head, And it wasn't because of an injury. It was just like, I was just so tense, I could barely turn my head. And it didn't make the connection, like maybe the way I'm living my life is causing this, right? Whereas now, if I feel that, I'd be like, hold on, what's going on? What am I not saying? And I would notice, in our partnership, I'm actually not happy at all and I'm not voicing it. And I know that if I then have a conversation with you and I go, listen, this is what's not working for me. That might be a difficult conversation to have, but I know that will give me the relief, right? Where I will then no longer feel that constriction in my throat. What I've also learned is that probably it's going to bring us closer, right? If we have that difficult conversation, it's actually going to bring us closer. Or maybe it brings us to a clean break where we're like, yeah, we really can't work together, okay. Which is also actually a favorable outcome, right? And it will basically then, it will stop that cycle. So, because if I keep ignoring it, it just gets worse and worse and worse until something breaks. And I think that this is a typical pattern. I think it's a pattern that many people will, like if you examine your life, there's something, because what I'm describing is almost like the pressure cooker, right? Where the pressure rises and rises and rises and rises until it blows the lid off. And for some people, that's maybe anger, You're like stewing in resentment until you explode. And the key would be to notice when the resentment starts building and intervene before the explosion, right? And in my case, the explosion is more like inwards, right? It's like instead of exploding outwards at other people, it's almost like I collapse eventually. But I think this is a typical cycle that we're in, the stuff that you leave unspoken kind of just gets worse until something bad happens. And the trick that it took me way too long to learn is like, do something before the big bad thing happens. Do something before you hit the wall, right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things in there, Shane. The first one is I'm hearing that when you're out of alignment and not speaking your voice, you actually have physical contraction in your throat. For me, when I'm out of alignment and I'm trying to do something, I actually feel it about here in my chest. And it's almost like an anxious sort of a little anxiety feeling. And I've noticed that is a trigger of like, I don't know if I'm supposed to do this. Let me think about this, or let me take a step back. And it's like, I need to say something. And I think that's an important one for people listening is our bodies are speaking to us so clearly when we are out of alignment. And you're saying, make sure you do something before it gets to the explosion. And I'll go even further and say most diseases, autoimmune diseases, a lot of these diseases are actually and being out of alignment in an energetic, in a life way, and not necessarily even in a physical way. I mean, sometimes obviously the eating habits, the environment, etc., but the stress that we're putting on ourselves by being out of alignment can actually not only cause the explosions, but cause sickness, right? And I've had people on the podcast, there's a woman, Natalie, who was doing that for a very long time, and she got a brain tumor from it. And when she changed her mindset and she changed her stress levels, she actually healed her brain tumor with no Western medicine, right? Great podcast if you want to watch it. And, you know, there's that. And then I'm also hearing this idea of have the difficult conversation. And man, I preaching to the choir here. It's so important to make sure that we need to have the difficult conversation no matter how scared we are. And it's like the PDF that gets downloaded on my website the most is the formula for a difficult conversation. And it's literally, it makes it easy. You guys can check that out if you want, it's free. But by having that conversation, you said it most likely will just bring us closer or know that we need to move apart. And both of those are positive things, right? And what I would say is it just leads us to that alignment. Sometimes that alignment is don't be with that partner, don't be at that job, don't be with that business founder. Break it apart. End it while you can end it before your life starts falling apart or you end up in a founder's dispute in court for 1.5 years, which I've been through. It sucks, right? Yeah. As an entrepreneur, most entrepreneurs have felt the pains of serious founder disputes. I mean, they're harder than even, I would say sometimes they're even harder than breakups.
Yeah, and totally. It's like, I think my mind has shifted so much about this where I used to pride, I still pride myself on my ability to do hard work, but I think we take that too far, right? Culturally, we're so proud of, look at how hard I'm working, where it's almost like, look at how much I can suffer. And the problem there then becomes, like if I can make a gym analogy, right? Of course, it's great if you can go to the gym and push yourself hard and just like, look, I can make the effort, right? I'm not too lazy to lift heavy weights or to keep going on the treadmill or whatever my workout is. That's great. But there's a very important difference between this is the pain of my muscles burning because I'm using them, and this is the pain because I'm about to throw out my back, right? That's a huge difference, and it's so important to listen to the signal of your body that says something is about to break. And I think this is like we're missing that distinction, and we're almost fetishizing the suffering actually. And certainly that's something I did, where it's almost like if I wasn't suffering, I felt like I wasn't doing enough. Whereas now I'm like, hold on, yes, I'm willing to work hard, but it doesn't mean that everything needs to be hard all the time. In fact, it's more like if something feels really hard, that's a sign that I need to, whatever, let's say in a business context, right? I need to maybe change something we're doing or put the right people in the right places, put the right processes in place so that it starts feeling more like an effortless flow again. The sign of me like struggling away every day, that's a sign that something isn't working well. And so it's almost like a reversal of, instead of I need to be suffering, otherwise I'm not justifying my existence enough or something like that. It's more like, okay, I'm willing to do some suffering. I'm willing to go through some pain, but I'm navigating, I'm almost using it as a signal. Where do I navigate to, right? And I'm not just navigating towards more pain. I'm navigating towards less pain. And I think it's actually so important, especially in entrepreneurship, It's like, well, a good business should be one, like ideally it's so efficient that it runs practically by itself, it makes loads of money. There's clearly a better business than one where I'm working myself to the bone every day and make almost no money. I've had both, by the way. So I'm speaking from experience when I say this, right? So it's like, clearly the business that's easier and makes more money is a better business. And similarly, like, the workout that gets me the result while I'm having a relatively good time and I'm not getting injured is a much better workout than one where I'm killing myself and always risking injury. And so I'm looking for that kind of efficiency. And for me, a big part of this is learning to listen to the signals, like we were saying, right? Signals from whatever, your throat, your heart, your stomach. I think like stomach is a great signal, right? Digestive issues and stuff like that often come up when we're out of alignment. But to recognize this as a signal and follow it. And the challenge for me was that I just was not I wasn't aware of this, and I also wasn't sensitive to this kind of signal. And this is where the idea, because like, okay, what we're talking about is being in full integrity, right? Like the ideal case is that you're so aligned that your whole system feels aligned, right? If you think about, okay, I'm having all the hard conversations, I'm eliminating all the unnecessary stress, I'm eliminating all the unnecessary suffering. What does that feel like? I'm in total alignment. And then if you imagine what that's like, you also, I think, immediately realize you're much more powerful in that state. But then, okay, how do I get there? For me, the answer is, or the shortcut that I found to this is, you get clear about what are all the lies that you're telling in your life, and then you stop telling those lies. Because I think the reason this is powerful is what we're talking about can feel like, it's almost like an advanced thing. Oh, navigate the subtle signals in your life, to stay in alignment. It's like, if you had told me that 10 years ago, I'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like I'm so stressed out, I'm so lost. I can't apply this concept in my life. But what I can apply is like, okay, what are you lying about? And that's like, ouch, but yes, I can tell you some things I'm lying about. And if you literally write down everything you're lying about, and you write down, like, what are you lying about in words? What are your lies of omission? And how are you lying in your behavior? I think this is also an important one, right? Because this is not about the technicalities because you could always say, well, I'm not lying as long as I'm not opening my mouth, right? And yet I can be lying. An example of lying is like, this is what I did all the time in a relationship. Let's say I need alone time. I feel a need for alone time, but I don't say it. And I tell myself I'm gonna, my partner wants to spend time with me, and I tell myself I do it for her. My presence is a lie. Me showing up there while I really don't want to be there and not saying that's a lie. That's dishonest behavior. And you write down all of that shit. And basically, this is the template, right? Write down all the lies in your life. Once you eliminate all of those lies, you will be in full alignment.
Okay. And this is a process that you take people through. Yeah. And you have a free PDF on your website. We'll put it in the show notes. That takes people through this process of finding all the lies of the straight up lies, the lies of omission, and the lies of behavior, is my understanding. Yeah. So the invitation that we were talking about, that this is the reason why this podcast scares the shit out of me, is we're going to do that. Yeah. And we're going to share with you all the lies that we have told ourselves and others. And I know part of your process is you sort of rank them from the ones that are making the biggest impact to kind of lowest ones. And you kind of start at the ones that are real problems and work your way down, right? And how long does this process usually take?
So I would plan for at least 20 minutes, but ideally, if you're going to do this, give yourself I would have an hour of free time. So you can just take time going through this process, and then also take time to sit with it. This is worth doing thoroughly. This is not the kind of thing I would rush through, and also, it's a process that unfolds, because you start with the most obvious, the biggest lies. And those are usually also the most damaging ones. As you start writing down your lies and you stay with it, it's almost like you get to more and more subtle layers, So, because if you think about a big damaging lie would be something like, I don't know, let's say I'm married and I'm cheating on my partner, right? That's obviously a big lie. It's an act of betrayal, and I know that if it gets discovered, it's going to cause all kinds of damage. And it's one of those lies where if that's the situation I'm in and you ask me, what are you lying about? Immediately that comes to mind, right? And it's very scary to even admit that this is what I'm doing. And it's one of those where it's very obvious, the cost of this lie is very obvious, right? So, because it feels gross. Every time I think about it, it feels bad. So carrying this lie with me is a cost on my nervous system and a cost on like how much bandwidth it takes up. And in a similar way, every lie has a cost. And the smaller lies have like less obvious, more subtle costs, right? But usually you get the big ones out of the way. This is what I'm doing. And then you can also ask yourself, well, what other lies, what consequences does this big lie have? This big act of dishonesty? Well, it makes me lie to all of these people in my life in all of these ways, right? In what ways does it make me lie to myself? It's another good one. It's like, am I telling myself that I'm fundamentally an honest, trustworthy person, even though I'm doing this thing? That's a lie I'm telling myself. And so I really want to invite you into a process of unpacking. And this is why, you could easily say, okay, I'm going to take 5 minutes, write down, these are a few things I lie about. And then it's not quite as impactful. But if you really sit with it and start digging, that's when it gets interesting.
So Shane, what's the process? And let's do it together. We'll keep the tape rolling and they'll edit it out later. And let's do it. So maybe start with, what is the process? Just write down all the lies first?
Yeah, so you take pen and paper, you start writing, what am I lying about? And as a simplified version of this process is that, but like we talked about, what are the lies that you're speaking? What are the lies of omission? And in what ways is your behavior dishonest? And I think those are three things. And like in the integrity audit in the PDF, I give more guidance, and also I give like some follow-up guidance of how to work with this. But as a simple starting point, if someone just wants to do this without having to remember 5 prompts or whatever, right? It's like, if you go these 3 things, lies that you speak, lies of omission, and in what ways is your behavior dishonest? And you brain dump, right? You just dump everything that comes up onto the page and you try to keep writing. You don't have to keep writing nonstop, but stay in the process. So you write down everything that comes to mind and you allow yourself to express this fully. And if nothing else comes to mind, just sit with it. Sit with it, stay in the process. Don't reach for your phone. Don't get distracted. Allow yourself to invite the next thing to come up. And this is really an act of courage here, right? To say, I am willing to uncover all the stuff that I'm dishonest about right now.
Shane, is this the lies that we're doing right now? Or is it like all the ones that like when I was a kid?
Yeah, no, the lies you're doing right now. The lies that are currently active in your life.
Okay, guys, let's do this. If you're listening at home, if you're watching, hit the pause button. Let's go through this. We'll go through it together. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to share the lies. And Shane will share some lies. And we'll come back to you and share some of those. I'm a little scared. Okay, let's get some paper, and let's go. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We went through this process. That was about 20 some odd minutes, maybe a little bit longer. And it's interesting to me because the good thing is I realize in all of my, or most of my relationships with women or romantic connections, I don't think I have much of anything there because I've gotten to the point of just being very clear on what I want and being okay. So that felt really good. And I realized that most of them are not that bad. And but there are little things here and there that are a little bit of a little curved here. And
I would say that, first of all, actually, I want to say, I think this was a really good example because I saw you like writing and then just closing your eyes and tuning in and kind of waiting for the next thing to emerge. I think that's really good. Like you stayed in the process, right? And that's really what I want to invite people to do. And then for me as well, it was actually really interesting. I uncovered, obviously I've done a lot of this work, and ever since I started eliminating lies from my life has been so much better. It's unbelievable. So obviously I'm also now finding big, costly lies here, but still it was quite interesting. But I think I uncovered one new thing that I think is really interesting, but it's one of those subtle things. So I think before we get to that, let's talk about some of the big stuff, because chances are a lot of people will have like at least one or two big expensive lies in their life. And I would say let's talk about that before we get into the more subtle things, because I think that's where you're at too, right? You already live in integrity mode for the most part, you know.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So before we get let's talk about some of the big stuff and also some of the benefits of removing this. So for me, historically, I think you asked me this question as well at one point, like what was the costliest lie in my life that I ever uncovered? And which is such a good question. And for me, there's two candidates of like big lies that I carry for a long time. One of them is very straightforward. Like the lie was, I'm not addicted to pornography, right? If you would have asked me, are you addicted to porn? I would have been like, no. Sure, I watch porn, but it's not a problem. But it's kind of like saying, you know, I drink every day, but I'm not an alcoholic. It's like, are you sure? You know? So, and that's also a typical pattern in addiction, right? You're in denial. So that was definitely happening for me. I was like, unfortunately, is the norm nowadays. I discovered porn at a young age and I got addicted before I knew what hit me. And it became a habit in my life that for decades, basically, I was watching porn almost on a daily basis. And I was justifying it to myself in the typical ways, you know, well, I don't do it that much. You know, there's other addicts who are worse addicts than me, you know, whatever. It's not destroying my life, you know, but it's actually denial because and once I woke up to this and actually, what am I doing? It's like, first of all, I'm spending way more time watching porn than I would deliberately choose, you know? If you were like, hey, how many hours per week do you want to spend watching this stuff? You know, and I don't know what it was, but my answer wouldn't be like 5 or more, you know? Like what's the ideal amount of time you want to spend watching porn? Well, even if you assume that it's not problematic, it'd be like, well, maybe like a half an hour a week or something, an hour a week. Certainly not an hour a day, right? That adds up. If nothing else, it's a waste of time, right? But then also like, hold on, why am I doing it so much? What's going on here? And then in denial of like, okay, it's somehow, you know, this is a stress response, you know, I'm escaping my stress, I'm escaping feelings I don't want to feel by just like numbing myself, distracting myself with porn. What's up with that? Which in a way also, you know, it adds to, so this is a lie that has consequences, right? Where the lie is, I'm telling myself I'm not addicted. And also I'm using the addiction to avoid other stuff. You know, I don't want to admit that I'm feeling bad about this thing, so I just distract myself with porn. I don't want to admit that I'm having this problem or this fear, so I just distract myself with porn, right? And those are all lies. It's all dishonest behavior. So that was one of the big ones in my life, for sure. And then it's liberating to get to the point where it's like, no, this is an addiction. This is causing problems. And yes, it might be difficult to get over this, but how much better is my life not being dependent on porn? Not wasting my time on porn, not frying my brain and my dopamine receptors with this every day. Right? How much better is my love life? How much more can I connect with real people now that I'm not like looking at all this hectic stuff every day, right? So the life upgrade on the other side is totally worth the pain of admitting I have a problem and the process of doing something about it, right? And then the other huge lie in my life was, this is more a lie of behavior, where the behavior is basically self-abandonment in relationships. So I would always be so focused in a relationship on the other person and her needs and on like this mission of I have to make it work, that I would just completely ignore myself, my own needs. And the lie I'm telling about it is that I'm doing it for her or that I'm doing it for the good of our relationship. And it's just simply a lie, because ultimately it's not good for anyone. And the truth that is hard to admit there is that what's really going on is that I'm being a coward. It's an act of cowardice to be in a relationship and not speak my boundaries and not speak my desires, not ask for what I want. This self-abandonment is really, it comes from a fear of, well, if I told you that I want alone time right now, what if you reject me? Or if I tell you that I want a certain thing, or that a certain thing is too much for me, that I have a boundary, the fear is that you will reject me because, and then there's a story in my mind that I'm not good enough, right? I'm not worthy. And if you reject me because I speak a boundary, if you say, or if you reject something that I want, then that reinforces the story that I'm not good enough. And so that's the truth of it. Like, I'm scared and I'm too cowardly to do something about it. And again, I think that's, it's very hard to admit. It's very hard to admit that this, this noble, self-sacrificing thing I'm doing in the relationship of putting her needs before mine is just me being a coward. And it's also immediately clear because initially I was so scared of speaking my boundaries and speaking my desires. I was so scared of it. But then learning to do that, so this would be the process of eliminating the lie. Okay, how do I stop telling this lie? I have to start speaking boundaries and desires. Very scary. But of course, the more I did that, the more amazing my relationships become. The more amazing my love life becomes. Now, all of a sudden, I'm not suffering in relationship. I'm actually having a good time, right? So those are, I think, two examples of probably two of the biggest shifts that came in my life from admitting, here's the lie, here's the dishonest behavior, and then doing the work to eliminate that. Absolutely huge difference. And in general, like I said, right, if you do an audit of all of your lies and you start eliminating those lies, you come into integrity more and more. And the experience of that for me is something that I've referred to as quiet power. So, and this is especially with men, right? I work primarily with men, where if you come into your integrity, the more you come into your integrity as a man, the more you develop quiet power, which is to say that you become powerful, but not in a way where you have to be posturing and loud and barking at people, right? You become, like, your presence becomes powerful. And one of the things I've noticed is that it tends to, like, the way you show up with more authority, but in a very calm way. And people pick up on that. So, and I think this is, there's a lot of talk nowadays about nervous system attunement. It's that kind of thing, Because if I show up and there's not a whole bunch of stuff running in my mind about, oh, I have to keep up this pretense and I have to make sure that, it's almost like I manipulate you the right way with my behaviors, with my various dishonest behaviors, right? I'm trying to please you, I'm trying to impress you, I'm trying to do all this kind of stuff. It's almost like all this shit is running in the background, causing kind of a nervous energy where I'm trying to control the situation. And if I drop all of that, I show up with way more presence, with way more depth, and other people pick up on that. And it's like, oh, I feel so much better, around someone who doesn't have all this stuff running in the background. And from that, the more you show up like that, the more you're inviting other people into authenticity as well. And it basically comes with authority. It makes you more attractive. It makes you a natural leader. For me, a feeling is like it's freeing up bandwidth. I used to have very little bandwidth because there's so much dishonest stuff going on and there's so much stress in my system. It's like I don't have the capacity to be a good leader, And the more of this stuff I'm just letting go and eliminating, the more my potential actually frees up. This is why it's worth doing the work, even if it's really scary. So I'm curious, are you willing to share? Well, what's the scariest thing to share from your list?
The scariest thing to share. Let's see. I think it's a lie of omission, and there was about a year and a half, 2 years ago, some things happened. They tried deporting me. They shut down this project I was working on for a year. And I just went into depression, and I was covering that up with an addiction. And my family doesn't know about that at all. So I haven't told them about that at all. My friends know, and it took me a while to come to an admission of this is a problem. Yeah. And I need help with this, and I need to go to my friends, and I need to do something about it. And it took me a while to get through it. And it still pops up here and there. But I think that feels like the biggest one for me. That feels scary to talk about because, my family are Christians. Right. And, so an addiction is a big deal for them, right? And also they just be worried and to know that I'm not sharing when I was going through a really depressed time in my life. And it felt like kind of my world crumbled. So that one feels big.
So what's the story there that you tell yourself why you're not telling that to your family?
The story I'm telling is I haven't been able to really trust my mother with vulnerable things because she comes, or it feels like she'll come with manipulation. And I do believe there's a love there that she's trying to express, but has trouble maybe expressing it in an unconditional way. And also, there's been points in my life when I have shared things and then she'll withdraw love to show her unapproval. And I don't want to be in that dynamic with her. And I don't want her worrying. But it's not even, that's not the real reason. The real reason is I just don't want to feel any manipulation or lack of freedom or control. So I just leave things out.
So I love this because I think it points at two things that are worth talking about. The first is that coming into integrity doesn't mean that you have to blurt out everything to everyone at all times. So, right, because I don't have to go around like confess about my porn addiction to everyone that I meet. Like even like, let's say, actually one of the truths I have.
You just did though.
I just did, yeah, I just did. So and I'm not addicted to porn anymore, thankfully. But I do. One of the things I wrote down is like I'm addicted to sugar. That's an active addiction right now. But yeah, I don't have to introduce myself. By the way, I'm an addict. I'm addicted to sugar, right? I don't have to blurt it out to everyone. And the second thing is to realize that often the reason we have these dishonest behaviors is because we don't trust ourselves. We don't trust ourselves that we can stand our ground. So this is me in relationships, right? It's like, why do I not honestly speak my desires and boundaries? It's because I'm like, oh, if she's going to be upset about this, I'm just going to collapse, right? It's like, I know that I can't handle this. And so that's the kind of thing I'm avoiding. So part of the work of eliminating the lies from our lives is to learn to like basically stay with myself and be like, look, you might be upset about this. You might not like this. And I'm going to stand my ground. And especially with big lies, it can have deep life consequences, right? Because maybe if I'm doing this audit, I'm like, okay, this whole line of work I'm in is just not working for me, right? The whole line of work I'm in is basically an ongoing active lie. And there's no way to come into full integrity while I'm still pursuing this career. Now that's a big, scary thing. And it might take time, right? I'm also not saying you're going to immediately like call everyone, you quit your job, get divorced, It's like, it's a process, it takes time. And part of the work is how can I get to the point where I can, so let's say, quit my job and still stand on my own 2 feet? How can I get to the point where I can tell someone, especially a family member, tell someone this thing that feels like it needs to be expressed and stand my ground, right? So that is part of the work. I want to be clear about that.
Yeah, thank you. Some other ones that feel a bit vulnerable, especially on social media, is I notice some of them are around social media. I don't feel truly authentic in social media, and I've been, spent a bunch of money and built teams that have given me advice, and I've done that advice, and it never, most of the time I didn't feel authentic. It's one of the reasons why I'm doing podcasts is because when we're talking, I feel fully authentic. When I'm in front of the camera, but one specific one is, the team that I have, we buy a few thousand likes for posts, so it games the algorithm, and then we get all the rest of it organic ones. And when we weren't doing that, it wasn't as good. And so like the cost benefit actually makes sense to play the system, because I'm a 48-year-old man that doesn't look good in a bikini. I'm not getting as many eyeballs on me for as long. Swimming upstream on that, right? So that feels like it's, and to be honest with you, when people ask me, I always tell them the truth, but it's a lie of omission, right? And it's just kind of there. I think there's another one that are kind of small. Oh, here's one that came up the other day, because I feel like I'm actually very strongly in integrity with my communication and my interpersonal skills and relationships. But, there was a guy, didn't really like him. And he's like, but I was still very nice. I'm still nice to people. I don't think that's really a lie, but, and he's like, let's get together, let's get coffee, let's go one-on-one. And I'd say, oh, I'd love that. But I wouldn't. Yeah. I had no intention of ever doing one-on-one with him. And I was actually thinking, how do I become more integrity? Do I say, hey, thank you for the offer. I actually don't resonate with you or don't even really like you very much. And I think you're not the person that's a priority for me to do one-on-one with. And I only do one-on-ones in podcasts, and a handful of people that are my closest friends are the only people I do one-on-ones with. or someone if I'm interested in dating them, and everyone else I do in groups. Like, do I say that, or do I just like, or maybe there's a better way to communicate that, like,
I love that. Yeah.
you know, which is not, I don't think it's some horrible thing, but when I said, oh, I'd love that, and I had no intention of ever doing a one-on-one with this guy, that's a lie. Yeah.
This is a great example. I also want to expand on this a little bit because, first of all, that is such a common lie, right? People say, oh yeah, let's meet up, let's stay in touch, whatever. Even though they have no intention to, and yeah, they might even actively dislike you, right? How often do we do that? And it's one of those things where also you can ask yourself, well, do I want other people to do that to me? Like, I don't want that.
Yeah.
You know, I don't need anyone to pretend that they like me more than they do. It's fine. And so what do we do with it? So first of all, I want to mention that this is a great example of a really small lie. It's like kind of a small white lie. You can go through your life telling this kind of lie all day long, seems to have a pretty low cost. And eliminating this kind of lie is also really beneficial. So if you take that big fat lies that dominate your life, those are the biggest growth opportunities, right? You eliminate that one, it's going to change your life dramatically for the better. But like I mentioned before, that might be a multi-year project, right? How do I leave my career that I've invested 2 decades into or something like that, right? That can take time. So I don't want to make it seem like you have to go after the biggest lie and that one only, or go in order of priority, because the smaller lies are a great way to practice being in integrity and to feel some of the benefits in a more subtle way, which might encourage you to go after the bigger ones as well. So this is great, right? If you think about, well, what would feel really honest and really good? What would feel aligned in that situation? Someone goes, yeah, I'd love to hang out. I'd love to do a one-on-one, and you really don't want to. I think what you gave before is like maybe an overly elaborate explanation. But can you imagine, like, what would be kind of a simple way to say no that feels good in your system without, you know, it doesn't have to be a whole explanation, or maybe you want to give a whole explanation, like, this is how I feel about you.
I'm not sure. It could be as simple as, thank you for that offer, and that's it. Instead of saying I'd love to, because now you're just giving gratitude with no intention and you're communicating. Or it could be, thank you for the offer, but I'm only doing one-on-ones with my close friends right now.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, that would probably be more true.
Yeah. So, because for me, it's also something that, yeah, there's usually more demand on my time than I have time. And so this is something, for me, I often just mention, you know, if someone invites me to something like that, I'm like, okay, look, realistically with my schedule at the moment, this is not going to happen, right? Where it's really like, and again, I'm not going into, you know, I'm not saying, well, you know, I don't like you enough or whatever. I'm just like, if I had unlimited time, sure, I would hang out with you, but I don't, right? And if I look at my schedule right now and you're telling me, hey, let's hang out before you leave Bali, I'm like, it's not going to happen. And that's just the truth. That feels truthful. And honestly, for me, it would feel bad if I told everyone, yeah, let's hang out. Yeah, I'm definitely going to see you before I leave, knowing that I'm not. Like, I can actually feel the cost of that in my system. Like, that feels like a little,
Yeah, and it gives you pressure and awkwardness in the connection. A couple other ones. I remember I tried the app dating here in Bali. And the first one, I put my age, which is 48, on it. And I don't feel 48. And the women that I was getting matched with felt like grandmas to me, quite frankly. So the next one, I put 38, just straight out lied on it. So that one I said. Another one is there was someone that wanted to borrow money from me. And I just said, I don't feel like I'm in a position to do that right now. And the truth is, I probably could have figured out how to do it. And I didn't want to, because I've let so many of my friends borrow money and they're not paying me back. And it like hurts the connection and hurts both of our connections from both sides, that I just didn't want to get into that. And I didn't really trust him that can pay me back anytime soon. And I didn't want to put that stress on it. Yeah. Another one was someone close to me who I really love was like, wanted to get married to someone in the United States and asked me if I'd be open to it. And I said, I'd be open to talking about it. And underneath, I was like, I don't think that's a good idea, when I could have said, no, that's not a good idea. And I did end up saying that, but it not in the beginning. Here's an interesting one a lie I tell myself. I'm not afraid of dying. I think I'm fucking terrified.
Interesting.
I don't want to die. I'm doing all this biohacking shit because I want to live like a healthy life for a long time. Some other ones are, I constantly always say, like, you know, in bios, like I started 12 businesses, which is all true, but some of those were little small ones that didn't get that far, you know? So that feels a bit like, I don't know if it's a lie or not, but it could be that maybe it could be said a little bit better. So it's not a lie, that's a true statement, but it's also implying something that isn't exactly true. It's like the way that I know the way it's going to get interpreted is not what it really is, right? Yeah. It's more like, hey, I started, you know, 8 or 9 businesses, and then there was a few ones that sort of got off the ground a little bit but didn't go that far. But I did start businesses, you know, truly they were businesses, but they weren't like full on with lots of employees or anything like this. So, and then I've also noticed there's a couple little ones in here which are around the superlatives, the always. Like I'm like, yeah, I do peptides, I inject peptides and do a longevity shake every day. And the truth is, there's some days I just skip. You know, I'm traveling, I'm doing things. So there's like a little lie in that, which is in the always, right? Or every day, when I could just easily just change that to most of the time. You know, so, you know, I was actually hoping I'd have a really big one that felt super vulnerable here. And I'm feeling actually really good. Because I'm like, I was like going through all my relationships and friendships and business relationships. And I'm like, no, I'm actually really freaking straightforward with people. And I really do try to like give all the information. And there are little things that are a little off here that I think I can come stronger. Now, if we were to like say, what are the lies I said in the past? Those ones are terrifying to me. There were some really nasty ones in there that were, really nasty ones in that I'm really ashamed and embarrassed about. But, you know, I have to say I'm doing pretty good right now. You know, I think like the addiction to nicotine is an interesting one. It's not a lie, but there's something there that I kind of tell myself that it's a way to sort of manage anxiety and ADHD. And in some ways I believe that, in some ways I don't. So I want to look into that more and see if it's just like an addiction and that's it. Yeah. Because I've had quit for a while and then it does other things for me that are really negative, even like months and months later when the actual addiction's gone. Mm-hmm. And I'm noticing, and then I end up looking for other things like sugar or drugs or sex or peak experiences. And it's like, so there is part of me that believes I'm using the nicotine to get those dopamine hits to manage ADHD instead of being on dexamphetamines, Ritalin, Adderall, Vyvanse, whatever. And I think that there is truth to that, but I'm not quite sure. I think that there might be some lie in there to myself that I want to unpack a little bit more.
I think this is a good example of like you're at a more subtle layer here where you're like, okay, it's not just a straight up dishonest thing. It's just like somehow the story I'm telling myself is not quite true. And this is then a more subtle task of how do you navigate to something that feels fully aligned. Yeah. You know? And I think this is my experience was with this. The more I eliminate the lies, the more I get to the more subtle stuff. And also, what I can share that I noticed is that my current dishonest behaviors, what they often have in common is that there's like like an attitude of let's not look at that, you know. It's like something is a bit misaligned. It's just like let's ignore that. You know, one of them is, for example, with my health, like my nutrition, my health habits and stuff. I am not as dialed in as I used to be. But it's almost like I still think of myself as that guy. And it's just like, let's just ignore that, you know? And it's an interesting thing because I feel like it's like a pattern that I'm noticing. And it's much more subtle than straight up saying, oh yeah, I do all this biohacking stuff, but actually I don't. It's much more like an internal story where I'm avoiding something, right? And this kind of motion of I'm avoiding something becomes then a new signal I can notice. And this is an example of a really subtle signal, right? Where and I feel like what you're describing is a bit like that too. It's a subtle signal. Another thing I wanted to expand on is vulnerability. Because often that is something that is causing us to lie in relational contexts. It's like, why am I not telling this person that I'm not going to see them? Why am I not just straight up telling them why I don't want to borrow or lend money or whatever? And it's because the truth is a bit more vulnerable. And what I found, and I'm sure you've had this experience as well, is that the solution to that is like even more truth, right? So it's like, I'm scared to tell you that, yeah, I've had bad experiences with lending money to people, and I know that it kind of taints the relationship in a way. And also I'm like scared I don't want to seem selfish. I don't want to seem like I don't care. And actually naming that is really vulnerable. And it's the more vulnerable I get in my explanation of why, the more it again becomes a connecting thing, right? Because if I just kind of try to brush it off or give a false explanation, it usually keeps like a distance. But if I'm willing to go, here's my whole thing, here's what I'm scared of, here's my inner turmoil that comes up with this, that then leads to closer connection again. Which brings us back to like, having that uncomfortable conversation is often like so liberating.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm also just feeling some gratitude for myself in recognizing if I would have done this 10 years ago or 5 years ago, it might be very different. And I mean, I know it would be. And it's like, the self-development journey has been intense for me for a while now. That's all I'm doing. I'm going through, sometimes a book or 2 books a week on self-development and audiobooks. And it's like, there's a lot of that. And then my whole life is sort of dedicated to having these podcasts and finding ways to upgrade and helping people come into more alignment, because that's what I need. That's what I desire for myself, right? I want more and more alignment in careers and connection and relationships and communication and all these things. And, that's why I have this podcast. And if you notice, we're trying to make this practical, give someone a way to not just hear about it, but to actually do it. And I think the encouragement is not to put any shame on yourself. If you're listening and you're like, man, my lies are really bad. I'm cheating on my wife. I stole money from my family, whatever it is. Know that all of us were there. I was there. I've lied about these things to my partner. I've cheated. All these things have been there at a certain point. And so knowing that doing the work, that the first step of a long journey is you just take one step. And, this process is beautiful, Shane. I really appreciate you sharing it and going through with it. And, I feel a lot better actually now, because I was thinking I was going to have to talk about some of this cheating or hiding addictions from partners. And, those a little bit scarier, And, but yeah, so if you're at home, how do people find you, Shane?
Yeah, so like you said, I think that the best place to start is doing this. If you want to learn this process, the integrity audit, we'll put a link to that in the show notes, and it's just my full name, shanemeLaugh.com. You can find my site and sign up to the newsletter and get this. So, and then on YouTube, I also just with my name, that's my channel where I post whatever, basically. And then there's the Quit by Healing is a channel I have that's dedicated specifically to overcoming porn addiction. Mm. So those would be the main places where people can find me and my work at the moment. Yeah. Amazing. For those listening in the car or on the audio and you can't get to the show notes, it's Shane's MeLaugh, MELAUGH. And we can find that on YouTube. Shane, thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this beautiful work in the world and helping people get more into their alignment. And for anyone that's listening, if you found this useful, all of my podcasts have useful, practical things in the connection to your extraordinary alignment. I have lots of free PDFs, things like this on my website, free courses. If you want to download that, it would be my honor to help take you through those. And thank you guys for listening, and have an amazing night. Thank you, Shane. Thank you so much, Joe. Ciao, guys. Mwah.